The bread of bone. The aroma of freshly baked bread used to be my muse. It wafted through the air like a warm hug, promising comfort and indulgence. But now, the scent of the St. Pierre bakery was a cloying shroud, a sickly sweet mask draped over a festering secret. It all started innocently enough. After years spent working for faceless corporations, I craved a return to simpler things. So, I bought the struggling St. Pierre bakery, a charming brick building nestled in a quiet corner of New Orleans. The peeling paint and faded awning held a certain allure, whispering tales of forgotten recipes and artisanal delights. The first few days were a whirlwind. Crusty baguettes emerged from the cavernous oven, their golden brown surface a testament to my newfound passion. Customers, drawn by the intoxicating aroma, filled the shop with chatter and delight. But then, things began to change. It started subtly, a stray feather on the floor, a faint scratching sound from the back room at night. I brushed them off as remnants of neglect, the ghosts of bygone flour sacks and clattering pans. Then came the first odd order. It was scrawled on a crumpled piece of paper, left on the doorstep one chilly morning. It wasn't for a croissant or a baguette, but for something called pain d'os, bread of bone. The name sent shivers down my spine. Bone in bread? It was absurd. Yet, a morbid curiosity gnawed at me. I spent hours scouring dusty cookbooks and forgotten online archives, but found no mention of such a recipe. Ignoring the unease, I tossed the note aside. But the odd orders kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. Brioche de sang, blood brioche, éclair de cendre, ash éclair. I refused to fill them, convinced it was a prank by some local teenagers. But the customers requesting these bizarre pastries were different. They were cloaked figures who materialized from the swirling mist that often clung to the cobblestone streets at dawn. Their eyes held an unnatural gleam, and their voices were raspy whispers that sent chills down my spine. One particularly foggy morning, a woman with skin the color of aged parchment shuffled in. Her sunken eyes held me captive. "Do you not have what I seek, baker?" she rasped, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "The pain d'os?" Terror choked my voice. I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, forcing a smile. She leaned closer, the smell of damp earth and decay washing over me. "You will learn," she hissed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "For the hunger grows." Then, just as abruptly as she appeared, she vanished into the swirling fog, leaving me trembling behind the counter. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by a gnawing fear that clawed at my sanity. I barricaded the bakery door at night, the rhythmic scratching noises from the back room a constant torment. Desperate for answers, I confided in Ms. Rousseau, the elderly woman who ran the antique shop next door. Her weathered face creased with concern as I recounted the strange orders and the unsettling customers. "There are whispers," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "of a dark magic practiced by a coven long ago. They used bread, not to nourish, but to appease a hunger that lurks in the shadows." My blood ran cold. "What kind of hunger?" Ms. Rousseau shook her head, a tremor running through her frail body. "It feeds on life force. They say the coven was banished, but perhaps their rituals linger within these very walls." Her words sparked a horrifying realization. The scratching noises, the strange orders, it all made a sick kind of sense. The bakery wasn't baking bread. It was being used as a conduit, a vessel to feed some unspeakable entity. Fueled by a desperate need to stop it, I delved deeper into the bakery's history. In the dusty basement, beneath a layer of cobwebs and forgotten baking tools, I found a hidden chamber. Here, amongst dusty scrolls and tarnished cauldrons, lay a thick, leather-bound book. Its pages were brittle and yellowed with age, filled with indecipherable symbols and cryptic incantations. Days bled into nights as I deciphered the book, its secrets slowly revealing themselves. It was a grimoire, a manual for the dark magic Ms. Rousseau had spoken of, and at its heart was the recipe for pain d'os, a grotesque concoction that used human bone meal as a key ingredient. The revelation sent a wave of nausea crashing over me. The bakery wasn't just haunted. It was a sacrificial altar. A cold dread settled into my bones. Now, I wasn't just fighting for my sanity, but for my life. The next odd order arrived with a bone-chilling difference. A single human finger, wrapped in a blood-stained cloth. The realization was chilling. They weren't just requesting the bread of bone. They were daring me to bake it. Panic clawed at me, but a flicker of defiance ignited within. I wouldn't be their pawn. Desperate for help, I revisited Ms. Rousseau. She listened intently, her frail body trembling. "There might be a way," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "An ancient ritual, a counterspell of sorts. But it requires..." She hesitated, her gaze flickering to a small, silver amulet she wore around her neck. "What?" I pressed, urgency filling my voice. "Sacrifice?" she whispered, her voice filled with resignation. "To sever the connection, you must offer something of equal value. The sacrifice." It was a chilling concept, but the alternative? I couldn't let the bakery continue feeding this monstrous entity, not if it meant condemning innocent souls. Ms. Rousseau explained the ritual in detail, her voice laced with trepidation. It required an offering of pure, unadulterated life force, the spark before it ignites into consciousness. In the grimoire's twisted logic, this meant an egg. But not just any egg. It had to be a perfect, unblemished specimen, untouched by the world. With a heavy heart, I raided my dwindling supplies, locating a single, pristine egg nestled at the back of the fridge. The ritual was a chilling affair. Following Ms. Rousseau's instructions, I performed a series of arcane gestures, chanting archaic words that sent shivers down my spine. The bakery, usually filled with the warmth of the ovens, grew cold, an oppressive silence blanketing the air. As I reached the climax of the ritual, a guttural growl echoed from the back room. The air crackled with a malevolent energy, and shadows writhed in the corners. The doorknob rattled violently, a sense of immense pressure pushing against the barrier. But I held firm, clutching the egg, channeling every ounce of defiance into my voice. Finally, with a blinding flash of white light that momentarily rendered me blind, the chanting stopped. A heavy silence descended, thicker than ever before. Tentatively, I opened my eyes. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The scratching noises from the back room had stopped. But had it worked? I approached the back room cautiously, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was shrouded in an unnatural darkness, deeper than the night itself. With a deep breath, I fumbled for the light switch. The room was empty. No flour sacks, no forgotten tools, just bare concrete walls and cracked flooring. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost knocked me off my feet. But then I noticed it. In the center of the room, nestled amongst the dust bunnies, lay a single cracked bone. It was human, that much was clear. But unlike the finger from the order, it was aged, weathered by time. A chilling realization dawned on me. The ritual hadn't stopped the coven's magic. It had severed the connection to the present. The bakery had been a conduit for a much older evil, and the bone was a grim reminder of its past deeds. I gingerly picked up the bone, a morbid sense of responsibility washing over me. This wasn't over. The darkness was gone, but not defeated. Now, I had a new purpose: to find the source of the evil, to ensure it never returned. News of the bakery's sudden closure spread quickly through the New Orleans grapevine. Ms. Rousseau, a staunch believer in discretion, helped fabricate a plausible story. But I knew the truth. The shop remained shuttered, a silent sentinel against the shadows. I became a ghost, roaming the back alleys and forgotten corners of the city, searching for remnants of the coven, for any clue that might lead me to the source of the darkness. Years passed, filled with dead ends and frustration. The bakery slowly became my haven, a place of both horrifying memories and unwavering resolve. One rainy afternoon, a familiar figure shuffled into Ms. Rousseau's antique shop. It was the woman from years ago, her skin even more leathery, her eyes burning with a feverish hunger. "You haven't forgotten," she rasped, her voice filled with a desperate urgency. The hunger, it grows stronger. He needs the bread of bone. He, not it. A single, chilling name tumbled from her lips. Baptiste. The name sent a jolt through me. Baptiste Lacroix, a figure shrouded in whispers and legends. A sorcerer said to have practiced dark magic in the swamps outside New Orleans centuries ago. The coven, it seemed, was working for him, feeding him life force through the bread of bone. A flicker of hope ignited within me. If I could find Baptiste's lair and disrupt the source, I could break the coven's hold for good. I desperately needed Ms. Rousseau's help, but the look in her eyes told a different story. "I can't," she croaked, her voice weak. "I helped you before, but this is beyond me." Panic surged through me. She was the only one who truly understood the danger, the only one who could offer guidance. But she was frail, near the end of her life. Suddenly, a wheezing cough racked her body. She clutched her chest, her face contorting in pain. With a final gasp, she crumpled to the floor, her silver amulet clattering to the ground beside her. Despair threatened to consume me. Ms. Rousseau was gone, and I was alone with the weight of this monstrous secret. But grief had to wait. Time was of the essence. Armed with her cryptic warnings and the knowledge gleaned from the grimoire, I ventured deep into the Louisiana swamplands. The air hung heavy with the smell of decay, and the trees formed a gnarled, skeletal canopy overhead. Following faint whispers from forgotten lore, I navigated the treacherous terrain, each step a gamble against unseen dangers. Days bled into nights, and the oppressive atmosphere slowly chipped away at my sanity. I saw things that defied explanation, wispy figures flitting through the trees, disembodied voices whispering secrets in the humid air. Then, just as doubt began to gnaw at my resolve, I stumbled upon it. A crumbling stone building, overgrown with vines and shrouded in an unnatural mist. It reeked of death and decay, a tangible manifestation of the evil that festered within. This was Baptiste's lair. Terror warred with a desperate sense of purpose within me. I crept closer, the grimoire clutched tightly in my hand. Inside, a grotesque scene unfolded. The air hung heavy with the stench of blood and decay. Cackling figures, the coven members, surrounded a massive stone altar, chanting in a guttural tongue. And on the altar, strapped to the cold stone, lay a young girl. Her eyes were wide with terror, her face pale and drawn. They were preparing her as the next sacrifice, the life force needed to appease Baptiste. Primal scream ripped from my throat. Ignoring the danger, I burst into the room, brandishing the grimoire like a shield. The coven members turned, their faces contorted in a mixture of surprise and rage. I launched into a desperate chant, channeling every ounce of my remaining willpower into disrupting the ritual. The air crackled with a malevolent energy as the two forces collided. But I was outmatched. The coven members, fueled by years of dark magic, overpowered me. They tore the grimoire from my grasp, its pages fluttering to the ground. Then, with a sickening twist, they shoved me aside, their chanting renewed with a renewed fervor. As the ritual reached its climax, a dark figure materialized from the shadows. Tall and gaunt, with eyes that burned with an infernal glow, he was everything the legends described Baptiste, the sorcerer fueled by centuries of stolen life force. He reached out a skeletal hand and placed it upon the girl's head. A wave of dark energy surged through her, draining the life from her eyes. A sickening scream escaped her lips, then silence. Baptiste roared in triumph, his skeletal body momentarily illuminated by a macabre green light. The coven members bowed before him, their faces twisted in a grotesque mockery of worship. But the victory was short-lived. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, the very fabric of reality seeming to strain. Baptiste's eyes widened in horror. He had overreached, consumed too much life force at once. The chamber began to tremble, the walls buckling inwards. With a deafening crash, the entire structure imploded, burying Baptiste, the coven members, and myself under a mountain of rubble. I lay there, trapped, my vision blurring. The weight of the stones pressed down on me, my lungs struggling for air. A single tear rolled down my cheek, a silent cry of despair. I had failed. I didn't save the girl, and in the end, my sacrifice wouldn't even destroy. Reloading, the mall never forgets. The Mall of Evermore wasn't just a mall. It was a colossal monument to consumerism, a sprawling labyrinth of gleaming chrome and pastel facades. Boasting 8,000 stores, yes, 8,000, it promised an odyssey of shopping unlike any other. For Sarah and Emily, two college friends on a summer road trip, the sheer scale of it was irresistible. They pulled into the cavernous parking lot, dwarfed by the behemoth of a building. 8,000 stores, Sarah muttered, a tinge of nervous excitement in her voice. How long do you think it would take to see them all? Emily, ever the pragmatist, scoffed. Years. Let's just pick a wing and hit the highlights. They opted for the aptly named Adventure Aisle, drawn by the promise of quirky boutiques and unique finds. The first few hours were a blur of neon lights, catchy music, and the intoxicating scent of cinnamon-glazed pretzels. They found a hidden bookstore filled with first editions and vintage maps, a record store with a DJ spinning forgotten classics, and a bakery with pastries so decadent they bordered on the obscene. But as the afternoon wore on, a subtle shift began. The once bustling crowds thinned, replaced by an unsettling silence. The cheerful music faded into distorted static. The air grew thick, clinging to their skin with an unnatural chill. Stores they swore they hadn't seen before began to appear, their windows displaying mannequins frozen in silent screams. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, pointing at a mannequin dressed in Victorian morning attire, its hand pressed against the glass as if pleading for escape. Emily forced a laugh. Maybe they're having a sale on vintage clothing? It sounded hollow even to her own ears. They stumbled upon a deserted food court, the tables littered with half-eaten meals as if the diners had vanished mid-bite. A single fly buzzed lethargically on a greasy plate of fries. A sudden, blood-curdling scream echoed through the sterile corridors, sending shivers down their spines. Fear, cold and sharp, clawed at Sarah's throat. "Let's get out of here," she pleaded. Emily, despite her bravado, looked shaken. They retraced their steps, desperate to find an exit. But the mall had become a twisted labyrinth. Stores they had visited moments ago reappeared, identical in every detail. The cheerful pastel colors now seemed menacingly artificial. Their phone signals were dead, replaced by an eerie, pulsing static. Panic gnawed at them. They sprinted down a corridor, hearts pounding like trapped birds, coming face to face with a towering animatronic dragon. Instead of the usual roar, its mechanical mouth contorted into a horrifying grin, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. They shrieked, scrambling past the monstrosity. As darkness descended, casting long, macabre shadows, they found themselves in a deserted toy store. The shelves groaned under the weight of dusty dolls with vacant eyes and teddy bears with ripped seams, their stuffing spilling out like entrails. Suddenly, a chilling giggle echoed from a dark corner. A rocking horse swayed rhythmically back and forth. An empty porcelain doll slumped in its saddle. Then, a guttural voice rasped from within the doll. "Lost, little ones?" Their blood ran cold. The voice was inhuman, a rasping whisper that seemed to slither into their minds. Sarah stumbled back, knocking over a shelf of stuffed animals. Their eyes seemed to follow them, glinting with an unnatural malice. With a shared look of terror, they understood. This wasn't just a mall. It was a living entity, feeding on the fear and desperation of its unwitting victims. The 8,000 stores weren't just places to shop. They were cages, holding captive the souls of those who had wandered too far within. They fled, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They burst into a clothing store, its racks overflowing with outlandish costumes. Spotting a rack of sequined bodysuits and bright wigs, a desperate plan hatched in Sarah's mind. They stripped off their clothes, hastily pulling on the outlandish costumes. Sarah grabbed a bright green wig that looked like a nuclear explosion, shoving it onto her head. Emily sported a pair of neon pink leg warmers and a sequined cowboy hat that sat precariously on her head. They burst out of the store, their laughter bordering on hysteria. "Look at us," Emily shrieked, her voice cracking with nervous energy. "We're ridiculous." For a moment it worked. The unseen entity faltered. The silence that followed was worse. The static buzz in their ears grew louder, a constant reminder of their isolation. The laughter died in their throats, replaced by a tense silence. Then, from the depths of the mall, came a low, guttural growl. It wasn't a human sound, but a primal, predatory rumble that sent shivers down their spines. "It doesn't like us being different," Sarah whispered, clutching a sequined glove. The darkness shifted, shadows contorting into grotesque shapes. A monstrous hand, crafted from mannequins and forgotten toys, reached down from the ceiling, its long, spindly fingers scraping against the polished floor. "Run!" Emily screamed, the absurdity of their neon outfits forgotten in the face of pure terror. They sprinted through the corridors, dodging mannequins that seemed to lunge at them in the flickering light. The air grew thick with a fetid smell, like decomposing flesh and burnt plastic. They found themselves back in the food court, the smell of decay even stronger here. A horrifying tableau met their eyes. Animatronic mascots from a long-forgotten fast food chain sat hunched over, their mouths stuffed with half-eaten mannequins. "We have to find a way out," Sarah gasped, her voice ragged. "Maybe an exit sign led us astray?" Desperate, they clambered over overturned tables, their garish costumes a stark contrast to the decaying scene. A flicker of movement caught Emily's eye. A group of figures emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by darkness. "Help!" Sarah croaked, bracing herself. The figures stepped into the light, revealing a group of teenagers, perhaps a dozen of them, their clothes tattered, their faces hollowed by fear. They were survivors, clinging to a desperate existence in the Mall of Evermore. Their leader, a girl with wild auburn hair and a defiant glint in her eyes, stepped forward. "Don't trust the mall," she warned, her voice hoarse. "It feeds on fear. The more you panic, the stronger it gets." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. Survivors. They weren't alone. "How do we escape?" Emily pleaded. The girl smirked, a humorless flash of defiance in her eyes. "There's no escape, not really," she said. "But we can fight back." She led them through a hidden service entrance, down dusty maintenance tunnels that reeked of mildew and despair. There, they huddled in a makeshift camp, surrounded by other survivors, a motley crew of mall employees, bored teenagers on a weekend outing, a lost family on a vacation gone horribly wrong. The leader, who introduced herself as Maya, explained their plight. The Mall of Evermore wasn't always a cursed place. Rumors whispered of a dark ritual performed by the greedy corporation that owned it, a desperate attempt to boost sales through a twisted pact with an ancient entity. The entity had devoured the souls of countless shoppers, twisting the mall into its personal hunting ground. Maya outlined their plan. They would use the mall's own machinery against it. Security cameras could be hacked to provide surveillance. Abandoned animatronic displays could be rewired, repurposed into weapons. The mall, built on consumerism, could become a weapon against itself. Sarah and Emily, their initial fear tempered by a newfound resolve, threw themselves into the preparations. Days turned into weeks, their days filled with scavenging forgotten tech, nights spent huddled around campfires, sharing stories of their lives before the mall. They learned about the mall's dark history, the whispers of missing persons, the unsettling rumors of a grand reopening that never came. Slowly, a strange camaraderie bloomed amongst the survivors. The outlandish costumes they donned became their uniform, a symbol of defiance against the soulless entity that held them captive. The day of the fight arrived, marked by an unsettling silence that blanketed the mall. They moved with a practiced efficiency, hacking into security systems, rewiring animatronic displays. The once frightening dragon transformed into a fire-breathing beast controlled by a group of teenagers. Forgotten arcade games came alive, spewing virtual projectiles at the encroaching darkness. The fight was brutal, The entity, enraged by their defiance, unleashed a wave of corrupted security robots and twisted mannequins. The survivors fought back, their laughter, once a desperate attempt to distract, now a defiant roar. Sarah, wielding a makeshift electric staff cobbled together from a shopping cart and a taser, charged headfirst into the fray. Emily, channeling her inner David, launched a barrage of tennis balls from a repurposed ball-firing machine against the entity's skeletal hand. Amidst the chaos, Maya led a group towards the central control room, the entity's perceived heart. The battle became a frenzied ballet of neon and terror. Sarah, her green wig askew and mascara streaming down her face, danced a deadly tango with a possessed vacuum cleaner, its hose whipping like a deadly serpent. Emily, her cowboy hat tilted at a jaunty angle despite the sheer terror in her eyes, hacked into the mall's PA system, blasting a distorted version of a peppy pop song that filled the air with a nightmarish dissonance. They reached the control room, a sterile space dominated by a massive computer console. Maya, her auburn hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, jabbed a screwdriver into a specific port. The monitors flickered to life, displaying a horrifying image. A swirling vortex of darkness pulsed at the mall's core, fueled by the screams and terror it had harvested. "We need to overload it," Maya rasped, her voice cracking. "Flood it with something. Light," Sarah gasped, a spark of inspiration igniting in her fear-addled brain. The grand opening lights. The mall had boasted a state-of-the-art light display, a dazzling kaleidoscope of color promised to be the highlight of its ill-fated opening. Maya, her fingers flying across the keyboard, rerouted the power grid. A collective gasp rose from the survivors as the familiar hum of electricity filled the air. Suddenly, the entire mall bathed in an unearthly light. The dazzling display, designed to entice, now became a weapon. The neon signs buzzed with a deafening intensity. The disco balls spun with a strobe-like frenzy, and the Christmas lights, inexplicably strung up despite the season, pulsed with a blinding brilliance. The darkness shrieked. It writhed and pulsed on the monitors, a creature in agony under the assault of light. The mannequins faltered, their plastic bodies melting in the heat. The robots sputtered and sparked, their circuits overloaded. A wave of nausea washed over Sarah as the air shimmered, distorting the very fabric of reality. The entity, weakened but enraged, lashed out. It manifested a monstrous, shadowy hand, reaching out to crush the control room. But in that final moment, laughter erupted from the survivors' comms. Laughter, tinged with hysteria and relief, that echoed through the mall and carried a terrible, infectious energy. The sheer absurdity of their costumes, the defiant joy they found in the midst of their fight, became their ultimate weapon. The laughter, a cacophony of absurdity, resonated with the entity like a virus. It spasmed, the darkness on the monitor recoiling in a horrifying parody of a smile. Then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, it imploded. Silence descended, profound and unsettling. The lights dimmed, the once joyful displays flickering weakly. Sarah sank to her knees, her green wig drooping precariously. The mall, once a monument to consumerism, now stood ravaged, a testament to their desperate fight. But the victory tasted hollow. As the survivors emerged from their hiding places, their eyes held a haunted glint. They were forever changed, marked by the horrors they had witnessed. The laughter that had saved them now echoed with a chilling edge, a reminder of the abyss they had stared into. And then, a flicker of movement on the monitor in the control room sent a fresh wave of terror coursing through them. The image was distorted, fuzzy, but undeniable. A single, glowing eye blinked back at them, a single word forming on the screen: "Reloading."